Don't touch the rim with your filthy fingers. God only knows what those hands have touched. Sterling Crow shoved the cup off the saucer. Get someone else to make it. Don't let your smell get on my coffee. She caught it before it hit the floor. I'll remake it, sir. He turned to his friends. Are you deaf? This place has gone downhill since they put her behind the counter. Laughter rose. One of them started filming. He snatched the name tag from her apron. You're just a cheap barista. I own a share of every cup you pour. Shut up and get it. She picked it up, pinned it back in place, and made the drink without a single word. But before long, Sterling Crow would be on his knees in this very shop, begging the woman he had just humiliated for something money could never buy. The alarm on Marin Ellis's phone went off early that morning. Same ringtone. Same quiet apartment in downtown Atlanta, where no one would ever guess a woman worth $380 million slept on a queen-sized bed with mismatched pillows. She had no driver, no assistant choosing her clothes. She pulled on jeans, a gray t-shirt, and sneakers, grabbed her keys, and drove herself to the flagship store on Peachtree Street in a 5-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked taillight. Soon she was behind the counter, apron on, hair tied back, name tag pinned to her chest. Just Marin. No last name. No title. This was her ritual. Every quarter, on the morning of the board review, she worked the floor. Not because she had to, but because she refused to forget where everything began. Her grandmother, Loretta Ellis, had sold coffee from a cart on this same block decades earlier. One cart, one burner. Paper cups she bought in bulk from a restaurant supply store 3 towns over. Loretta could not afford a shop, so she stood on the sidewalk in the rain, in the heat, in the bitter cold, pouring cup after cup until her hands cracked and bled. She never complained. She saved every dime. And when she finally had enough for a lease on a tiny 600-square-foot space with a leaking roof, she cried for the first and only time her granddaughter ever saw. That small space became Ellis & Company. Marin took over as a young woman after business school and after internships at firms that paid her half of what they paid the white graduates with the same degrees. She did not complain either. She learned. She watched. She built. Now Ellis & Company had 122 locations across 14 states. The flagship on Peachtree Street, the very spot where Loretta's cart once stood, had floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian espresso machines, and a private meeting room in the back with soundproof glass and a mahogany table that seated 12. That meeting room was already full. Isolde Croft, the CFO, sat at the head of the table with her laptop open and reading glasses balanced on the tip of her nose. Beside her sat the COO, the VP of Marketing, the General Counsel, and 3 regional directors. They were reviewing quarterly earnings, expansion forecasts, and a new supplier contract worth $11 million. Their voices stayed low, professional, focused. No one in the cafe knew who they were. The soundproof glass made the room look like any other private dining area, just people in suits having a breakfast meeting. Exactly the way Marin wanted it. Out front, she wiped down the counter, calibrated the grinder, and restocked the pastry case. Zara Holt, the store manager, leaned against the register and watched her with a look somewhere between admiration and exhaustion. You know you have a $50 million meeting in 2 hours, right? Marin smiled. I know. And you're restocking croissants. Somebody has to. Zara shook her head. She had known Marin's secret for years, ever since the day she accidentally opened a FedEx envelope addressed to the CEO of Ellis & Company and found Marin's face on the annual report. She had never told a soul, not the other baristas, not even her own husband. Mateo Cruz, the newest hire, was setting up the cold brew station. 20 years old, First real job. He moved fast but knocked things over. Marin liked him. He reminded her of herself at that age. Nervous, eager, trying too hard to prove he belonged. "Morning, Marin," Matteo said. "You're always here before me. You sleep here or something?" Something like that. The front door chimed 2 minutes before opening, but Zara unlocked it anyway, because the man outside tapped on the glass with his car key as if he owned the building. Sterling Crow walked in the way he always did. Loud cologne first, then the rest of him. Tailored navy suit, Rolex Submariner, leather briefcase he never opened. He had been coming every weekday for years, and in all that time he had never once said please, thank you, or learned a single employee's name. He looked at Marin and snapped his fingers. "The usual. And make it fast. I've got a meeting that's worth more than your annual salary." Marin picked up a cup and started pouring. The morning had just begun. Sterling did not sit down right away. He never did. He liked to stand at the counter, leaning on one elbow, making sure everyone in the cafe could see him. The suit, the watch, the way he spoke to the staff as if they were furniture. This morning he had company. 2 men trailed behind him, both in fitted suits, both carrying the same brand of leather portfolio. One was tall and thin, with slicked back hair. Sterling called him Reed. The other was shorter, heavier, with a signet ring on his pinky. Sterling called him Cole. He introduced them to no one behind the counter. In his mind, the people who worked here did not count. Marin, he said her name the way someone might call a dog. Flat, impatient, as if the word itself were beneath him. "Large oat milk latte. Extra shot and whatever these 2 want." He jerked his thumb toward his friends without looking at them. "Put it on my tab." Marin nodded. "Of course. And for you 2? The tall one, Ridi, glanced at the menu board. "Just a black coffee." Cole did not look at her. He was typing on his phone. "Same. Coming right up." She made all 3 drinks in under 4 minutes. Latte art on Sterling's. A perfect rosetta, the kind that takes years to master. She set them on the counter, lids off, exactly the way Sterling liked them presented. Sterling picked up his cup. Took 1 sip, held it in his mouth for a moment like a sommelier tasting cheap wine, then set it back down with a thud. "This tastes like dishwater." Marin did not react. "I can remake it for you." He pushed the cup toward her. Foam sloshed over the rim and onto the counter. A drop landed on her wrist. "I said extra shot. Does that mean something different where you come from?" Reed chuckled. Cole looked up from his phone and smirked. "Honestly, Sterling," Reed said, "you'd think basic instructions wouldn't be that hard. You'd think." Sterling shook his head. "But here we are." Marin took the cup back, poured it out, and started fresh. Same measurements, same technique. The first one had been perfect. This one would be identical. But she made it anyway, because Sterling was not paying for coffee. He was paying for the feeling of making someone do something twice. While the machine hissed, Sterling leaned against the counter and raised his voice, not shouting, just loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. He wanted an audience. He always wanted an audience. "You know, I just closed a deal on this chain. $2 million. He paused to let the number land. "Best investment I've ever made. I'm basically a part owner now. Every time she pours a cup," he pointed at Marin's back, "a little piece of that revenue goes straight into my pocket." Reed nodded. "Smart money." "Damn right it's smart money." Sterling adjusted his cufflinks. "See, that's what separates people like us from people like her. We build things. We create wealth. We move markets." He lowered his voice just slightly, the kind of lower designed to carry even farther. "She just pours it. Day in, day out. Same apron, same minimum wage. Same. Nothing. He laughed at his own words. Both friends joined in. Cole raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. To the Empire Builders. To the Empire Builders, Sterling repeated. A woman at the window table, mid-30s, reading a book with a sleeping toddler in a stroller beside her, looked up and frowned. She made eye contact with Marin for half a second. Marin gave her a small nod. The woman looked back down at her book. She said nothing. Nobody did. That was the thing about Sterling Crow. He was loud enough to make everyone uncomfortable, yet polished enough to make them doubt whether they had truly heard what they thought they heard. The racism was always wrapped in a joke, tucked inside a compliment, buried under a business term. Plausible deniability in a navy suit. Marin set the new latte on the counter. Same perfect Rosetta, same steady hands. Sterling picked it up, sipped, paused, and made a show of considering it. Better. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, held it up between two fingers so his friends could see, then tossed it onto the wet counter where the foam had spilled. That's your tip. Consider yourself lucky. Most people in your position don't even get that. The bill soaked through immediately, ink bleeding into the foam residue. Marin picked it up, smoothed it flat with both hands, and put it in the tip jar without a word. Cole nudged Reed. She's well trained, at least. Sterling grinned. See that? No pride, no backbone, no fire. That's why they stay where they are, generation after generation. He tapped the counter twice with his knuckle, slow, deliberate, the way someone might pat a dog's head. Good girl. The cafe went quiet. Not silent. The espresso machine still hummed. The playlist still murmured through the speakers. But the human sounds stopped. Conversations paused. A spoon stopped clinking. The woman with the book closed it. Mateo Cruz, only a few feet away at the cold brew station, froze. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the pitcher so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at Marin, waiting for her to say something. Anything. She did not. Mateo took a step forward. Zara caught his arm from behind the register and shook her head once, hard. Don't, she whispered. Not now. But I know exactly what he just did. Not now, Mateo. Mateo stepped back. His chest rose and fell fast. He turned away and started wiping a counter that was already clean, pressing so hard the cloth squeaked against the surface. Sterling and his friends took a table near the window. He sat with his back to the counter, a man who never imagined the help was worth watching. His friends leaned in, and the three of them talked in low voices about returns, portfolios, and the next big play. Every few minutes, Sterling's voice would spike, and a phrase would float across the room. Passive income, my equity stake, the Ellis brand. He said Ellis as if it were something he had invented. From the counter, Marin could hear every word. She wiped down the espresso machine. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But Zara, who had known her for years, noticed something she had never seen before. Marin's left hand, the one holding the cloth, pressed flat against the steel surface for just a moment. Not shaking. Grounding. Behind the soundproof glass of the private meeting room, the board meeting continued. Isolde Croft was walking the team through the latest earnings. Revenue up 19%. The cold brew line had exceeded projections by 30%. 3 new locations ahead of schedule in Denver, Austin, and Portland. Isolde paused mid-sentence. She was facing the glass wall. From the meeting room, she had a clear line of sight to the cafe floor. She watched Sterling toss the soaking $5 bill. She watched him tap the counter and say 2 words she could not hear but could read on his lips. She watched Marin pick up the bill, smooth it flat, and place it in the jar. Isolde's jaw tightened. She looked at Gideon Moss, the general counsel, seated to her left. Gideon's pen had stopped moving. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were not. Isolde turned back to the room. "Let's continue." Nobody in the meeting room said a word about what they had just witnessed. Not yet. But Gideon Moss wrote something in the margin of his legal pad. Just 2 words, underlined twice. Crow. Investor. Back on the cafe floor, Zara walked over to Marin and leaned close enough that only she could hear. "You okay?" Marin smiled, the same smile she always gave. Warm on the surface, steel underneath. "I'm fine, Zara." "He called you good girl in front of everyone." "I heard what he called me. How much longer are you going to let this go on?" Marin looked toward the meeting room. Through the soundproof glass, she could see Isolde's silhouette, the glow of the projector, the shoulders of people who reported to her, people who respected her, people who would walk through fire for her because she had walked through fire first. She looked back at Zara. Not much longer. Zara studied her face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there made her stop asking questions. Matteo appeared at Marin's elbow. He was still angry. His voice came out tight, barely controlled. "How do you just stand there? How do you let someone talk to you like that?" Marin dried her hands on her apron, folded the towel neatly, and set it on the counter. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made Matteo stand straighter. "Patience is a skill, Matteo, and some people dig their own graves if you just hand them the shovel." Matteo blinked. He did not understand yet. He would. Sterling Crow sat at his window table, sipping his remade latte, telling Reed and Cole about the empire he had invested in. He used the word empire 3 times in 4 minutes. He said, "my money," 4 times. He said the name Ellis as if it were a trophy he kept on his mantle. He had no idea that the woman who had just made his coffee, the one he had called good girl, the one whose tip he had thrown into a puddle of foam, was the Ellis on every cup, every sign, every contract, and every check his precious $2 million had ever touched. And the morning was far from over. Sterling Crow did not leave after his latte. He never left quickly. He liked to linger. He liked to be seen. And this morning, with Reed and Cole hanging on every word, he liked it even more. By the time the cafe filled with the morning rush, office workers, freelancers with laptops, a couple arguing quietly over a shared muffin, a group of college students claiming the corner booth, the noise level rose. Sterling's voice rose higher. He called Marin back to his table. "Sweetheart." He held up his empty cup and shook it. "Another one. Same thing. And this time, maybe put some effort into it." Marin walked over and took the cup. "And wipe this table down while you're at it. There's a ring. I'm not paying $6 a cup to sit in filth." She set the cup on her tray, pulled the cloth from her apron, and wiped the table in 2 smooth strokes. Sterling watched her the way a man watches a servant, checking for mistakes, expecting them, hoping for them. "You missed a spot." She wiped it again. "Better." He turned to Reed. "You have to stay on top of them. Give an inch. They take a mile. That's just how it is." Cole finally looked up from his phone. "You come here every day, every single day." Sterling leaned back. "Years, same seat, same order, same girl screwing it up." He raised his voice on the last part, making sure Marin could hear. "You'd think after hundreds of cups she'd figure it out. But some people just aren't built for learning." Reed nodded. Cole did not look up. Even Cole, it seemed, had a threshold, though not a high one. Marin went back to the counter and made his 3rd latte of the morning. Matteo was beside her, grinding beans, but his eyes kept drifting to Sterling's table. "He's getting worse," Matteo muttered. "He's getting comfortable," Marin said. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Comfortable people make mistakes." Matteo looked at her. She did not explain further. She never did. Sterling's phone rang. He picked it up, leaned back in his chair, and spoke at a volume that turned the entire cafe into a speakerphone. "Yeah, I'm at the Ellison Company flagship right now, sitting in my investment." He laughed. "No, seriously. I put $2 million into this company. I practically own the place. You should see how they run it. The staff is barely competent. I keep telling them to hire better people, but you know how it is with these diversity hires." He laughed again, louder this time, feeding off the sound of his own voice. "Honestly, I don't know why I bother. But someone has to keep standards up. If the investors don't hold them accountable, who will?" The woman with the book looked up again. This time she did not look away. She stared at Sterling with open disgust. Sterling did not notice. He never noticed. "Listen, I'm meeting with some of their board later today. Going to push for some changes, better quality control, better staff." He glanced at Marin, starting with the ones who can't take a simple order. He ended the call, put his phone on the table, and looked at Reed and Cole. "Gentlemen, I think it's time I introduced myself to the people actually running this company." He nodded toward the meeting room. "Those suits in the back, that's the board. I've been meaning to make my presence known." Reed raised an eyebrow. "You're just going to walk in?" "I'm an investor. I have every right." Sterling straightened his tie. "But first, one more coffee, honey." He snapped his fingers at Marin from across the room. "One more, and bring it to me this time. I'm tired of walking to the counter like some commoner." Marin brought the latte to his table and set it down carefully. Sterling reached for it, his elbow, deliberate or not, and everyone who saw it knew it was deliberate, knocked the cup sideways. Hot coffee poured across the table and onto Marin's apron. The brown stain spread across the white fabric from her waist to her thigh. She stepped back. Steam rose from the cloth. "Oops." Sterling did not stand, did not reach for a napkin, just sat there with a half smile. "Clumsy me." Reed covered his mouth. Cole let out a short, ugly laugh. "Maybe you should get yourself cleaned up, sweetheart." Sterling waved a hand. "And bring me another one, since you wasted that one." The cafe was watching now. Every table, every pair of eyes. The college students in the corner had their phones out. The woman with the book was gripping it so hard the spine was bending. The couple who had been arguing had stopped, united for the first time that morning in their shared disbelief. Marin looked down at her stained apron, coffee dripping onto her shoes. She untied it, folded it neatly, stained side in, and set it on the counter. She put on a fresh one from the shelf beneath the register, tied it, and smoothed it down. Then she made another latte. Mateo's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. He pulled his phone from his back pocket and angled it toward Sterling's table. The red recording light blinked. Zara saw him. She did not stop him. Marin brought the fresh cup to Sterling's table and set it down. This time she stood back half a step, out of elbow range. "Your latte, sir." Sterling looked up at her. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not guilt. Sterling Crow did not feel guilt. It was annoyance. The annoyance of a man who expected a reaction and did not get one. Every insult, every humiliation, every deliberately spilled drink. And she just stood there, calm, professional, unbroken. It infuriated him. "You know what your problem is," Sterling said. He was not smiling now. "You've got no ambition, no drive. You come in here every day, put on your little apron, pour your little drinks, and that's it. That's your ceiling. Some people are meant to serve, and some people are meant to lead. And sweetheart," he pointed at her with his index finger, close enough that she could feel the air move, "you were born to serve." Marin looked at his finger, then at his face. Her expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something so subtle that only Zara, watching from the register, caught it. It was not hurt. It was not anger. It was a decision. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Sterling waved her away. "Just stay out of my sight until I need you again." She turned and walked back to the counter. At that moment, the door to the private meeting room opened. Isolde Croft stepped out. She was heading toward the coffee station at the side counter, the one reserved for staff and guests, away from the main bar. She wore a charcoal blazer, pearl earrings, and the kind of quiet authority that did not need to announce itself. Sterling glanced at her and registered nothing. Just another woman in a suit, probably some mid-level manager. Isolde poured herself a drip coffee, black, no sugar. She stood at the side counter for a moment, stirring slowly with a wooden stick. From where she stood, she had a direct view of Sterling's table, Marin's station, and the coffee stain still glistening on the floor, where Marin's first apron had dripped. She took a sip, set the cup down, and walked back toward the meeting room. As she passed Marin, she slowed. Their eyes met. Isolde's expression asked a question. Marin's answered it. Not yet. Isolde nodded, barely perceptible, and disappeared behind the soundproof glass. Sterling noticed none of this. He was showing Reed something on his phone, a stock chart, a graph going up. He pointed at it and said, "That's my return on Ellis. 23% in 18 months. You should get in before the next funding round." Behind the counter, Zara moved close to Marin. She spoke through her teeth. "That woman who just walked out of the meeting room. She saw the stain on the floor, Marin. She saw everything." "I know. What are you going to do?" Marin looked at the meeting room. Through the glass, she could see Isolde sit back down, say something to the room, and gesture toward the cafe floor. Gideon Moss leaned forward. The COO turned in her chair to look through the glass. They were all looking now. "I'm going to let him finish," Marin said. "Finish what?" "Digging." Matteo kept filming. The red light blinked steadily. Sterling finished his latte, set the cup down with a satisfied clink, stood up, and adjusted his jacket. "All right, gentlemen." He looked at the meeting room door. "Time to meet the people who actually run this company." He walked toward the soundproof glass like a man walking onto a stage. Shoulders back, chin up. $2 million of unearned confidence. Marin watched him go. She untied her apron, folded it, and set it on the counter for the last time. The morning shift was over. Sterling knocked on the glass door of the meeting room. 2 sharp raps. He did not wait for an answer. He walked in as if he were expected. The room went still. Isolde Croft looked up from her laptop. Gideon Moss set his pen down. Elara Voss, the COO, turned slowly in her chair. 3 regional directors stopped mid-conversation. The projector glowed behind them, a slide titled Q2 Revenue by Region, green arrows pointing up. Sterling did not notice the silence, or maybe he did, and mistook it for respect. "Good morning." He flashed the smile that had closed deals his entire life. "Sterling Crow, investor. Put $2 million into the company last year." He let the number settle. "Figured since I was here, I should introduce myself to the leadership team. Get some face time." Isolde removed her glasses and folded them. "Mr. Crow, this is a private meeting. I understand that. But as a shareholder, I think I've earned a seat." He pulled out the empty chair at the end of the table and sat down without being invited. Leather creaked. He crossed one leg over the other. "I've been coming to this location every day for years. I know this business from the ground up." Gideon Moss's pen was moving again. Sterling did not look. "And frankly," Sterling continued, "I have some concerns, starting with staffing." He jerked his thumb through the glass toward the counter, toward Marin. "That barista out there, the black girl, she's a liability. Rude, incompetent, can barely make a latte without screwing it up. I've told her manager multiple times. Nothing changes." He leaned forward, elbows on the mahogany table. If this company is serious about growth, start with the basics. Fire the dead weight. Hire people who actually give a damn. I didn't put $2 million into this brand to watch it get dragged down by employees who can't even smile at a customer. The room was so quiet, he could hear the espresso machine humming through the soundproof glass. Isolde looked at Gideon. Gideon looked at Alara. Alara looked through the glass at Maren, wiping down the machine, posture straight, face calm. Sterling misread the silence completely. Look, I'm not trying to tell you how to run your business. He raised his hands in mock surrender. But when you've got as much skin in the game as I do, you start caring. Quality control, brand image, the kind of people who represent you. He straightened his tie. So, is your CEO here today? She is. 2 words, no emphasis, no drama. Sterling blinked. Great, can I meet her? Isolde did not answer. She looked past Sterling's shoulder, through the glass door he had left open, toward the cafe floor. Sterling turned. Maren was already walking toward the meeting room. She had untied her apron and folded it neat and precise the way she always did, then left it on the counter beside the espresso machine. Same gray t-shirt, same jeans. Nothing about her appearance had changed, and yet everything had. She stepped through the door. Isolde stood. The board stood with her, all at once. Chairs pushing back in unison like a reflex, like muscle memory, like people who had done this 100 times. Mr. Crow. Isolde's voice carried the full weight of the room. Allow me to introduce the founder and CEO of Ellis & Company, Maren Ellis. The name hit Sterling like a car wreck. Ellis, on the cups, on the signs, on the building, on the contract he had signed, on the checks he had cashed, on the annual report he had never read past the first page because he had never bothered to look at the photograph. Ellis, the woman who made his coffee. Sterling's face went through every color a human face can go through in 3 seconds. Red, white, gray. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His crossed leg slid off his knee and hit the floor with a dull thump. Through the glass, Reed's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Cole's phone lay on the table. Screen up. Forgotten. Maren walked to the head of the table. She did not rush. Every step was measured. Every person in the room watched her the way you watch someone step onto a stage that was always theirs. She stood beside Isolde and looked directly at Sterling. He was smaller now. The chair he had taken without invitation seemed to swallow him. His shoulders had dropped. His tie looked crooked. The Rolex, the one he always made sure caught the light, was hidden under the table where he had pulled his hands into his lap. Mr. Crow. Maren's voice was calm. Even. The same voice that had said, "I'll remake it, sir," only a short while earlier. Thank you for your feedback. I'll take it from here. Sterling opened his mouth. I didn't. I know, Maren said. You didn't know. She pulled out the chair at the head of the table, her chair, and sat down, opened a folder, and looked at Isolde. Where were we? Q2 revenue, slide 14. Let's continue. Sterling Crow sat at the end of the table in a chair he had stolen, in a room he had barged into, in a company he had claimed to own, and understood for the first time in his life that he was the smallest person in it. Nobody asked Sterling to leave, not right away. That was the worst part. They simply continued the meeting. Maren opened her folder. Isolde advanced to the next slide. Alara read out regional performance metrics. Denver up 12%. Austin exceeding foot traffic projections. Portland on schedule. Numbers. Charts. Green arrows. Business as usual. Sterling sat at the end of the table like a man who had walked into his own funeral and could not find the exit. He tried twice to speak. The first time, nothing came out. The second time, he managed 4 words. I didn't. I mean, nobody looked at him. Isolde clicked to the next slide. Gideon took notes. A regional director asked a question about the supplier contract. Marin answered it calmly, precisely, from memory, without glancing in Sterling's direction. He did not exist anymore. That was the punishment. Not shouting, not accusations. Erasure. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Sterling's phone buzzed on the table. Then again. Then a third time. Reed. Get out of there. Cole. A single word. Bro. Sterling stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Every head turned, not in surprise, but in the tired way people look at an interruption they have been expecting. Miss Ellis. His voice cracked on her name. The name he had said 100 times at this counter, and never once connected to the woman in front of him. I want to apologize. I had no idea. If I'd known who you were, you would have been polite. Marin finished his sentence without looking up from her folder. That's the problem, Mr. Crow. Not that you didn't know. That it mattered. Sterling looked around the table for an ally. There were none. Isolde's face was stone. Gideon's pen had stopped. Ilara watched him the way a scientist watches a specimen. It was just, I was joking around. I didn't mean, you called me a liability. Still calm. Still even. You told the board to fire me. You called me, good girl. She paused. In my own company. At my own counter. In front of my own employees. Each sentence landed like a fist on an open table. Sterling flinched at the last one. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm truly sorry. Marin looked at him for the first time since she had sat down. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. With something worse. Clarity. You're sorry you got caught, Mr. Crow. There's a difference. She turned to Isolde. Have legal review Mr. Crow's investment agreement. Full compliance audit. And prepare a formal buyback offer for his shares. Isolde nodded. Gideon's team will have it by end of day. Gideon was already writing. The 2 words he had scribbled earlier, Crow, investor, now had a full paragraph beneath them. Sterling's face drained of whatever color it had left. You're returning my investment? We're reviewing our relationship with you, Isolde said. Given what we witnessed today, and what our staff has apparently experienced for years, the company has an obligation to act. Years, Ilara added quietly, the first words she had spoken directly to Sterling. They landed like a verdict. Sterling stood in this middle of the room, hands at his sides, $4,000 suit hanging on him like borrowed clothes. Through the glass, he could see the cafe. Matteo behind the counter, phone in hand, red recording light still blinking. Zara beside him, arms crossed. 3 customers with their phones raised. Everyone was watching. Mr. Crow! Marin's voice came from behind him. She had not stood, still seated at the head of the table, pen in hand, folder open. Security will escort you out. Please don't come back. A man in a dark polo appeared at the door, quiet, professional. He did not touch Sterling. He did not need to. He simply stood there and waited. Sterling walked out of the meeting room, through the cafe, past Matteo and Zara, past the counter where he had thrown wet bills and snapped his fingers and said, good girl, past the window table where Reed and Cole sat frozen, portfolios closed, faces blank. The front door opened. The bell above it chimed. The same cheerful, tiny sound it made for every customer every morning. Sterling stepped through. The door swung shut behind him. Inside, the cafe exhaled. Zara uncrossed her arms. Matteo stopped recording. The woman with the book let go of its spine. The college students exchanged glances. Someone, nobody could say who, started clapping. 1 person, then 2, then the entire room. Through the soundproof glass, Marin heard nothing, She was already on the next slide. Mateo posted the video that same morning. He did not add a caption. He did not need to. The footage spoke for itself. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of Sterling Crow calling a black woman good girl, throwing a wet $5 bill on the counter, deliberately spilling coffee on her apron, and snapping his fingers in her face. The final 30 seconds showed him walking into the boardroom and demanding she be fired, then the board standing up, then his face when he heard the name. Mateo titled it, "Man bullied a barista for years. She was his CEO the whole time." By midday, the video had 50,000 views. By evening, it had crossed 2 million. By the time Sterling Crow woke the next morning and checked his phone, it had been viewed more than 14 million times across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The comments came in waves. The first wave was rage, pure unfiltered fury from strangers who had never met Marin Ellis, but recognized exactly what Sterling had done, because they had lived it, because someone had called them good girl, or honey, or boy at their own job, in their own town, in their own skin. The comments were not polite. They were not measured. They were raw. This man called a CEO good girl to her face in her own store. Let that sink in. He said she was born to serve. She built the empire he invested in. I'm screaming. The way she just kept making his coffee, that's not weakness. That's a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. The second wave was the hashtags. Hashtag Respect Your Barista trended nationally within hours. Hashtag Ellis & Co. trended alongside it. Hashtag Sterling Crow trended too, but not the way he wanted. The third wave was the media. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran it first. Hedge fund manager humiliates barista. Discovers she's the CEO of the company he invested in. CNN picked it up by afternoon. The Today Show ran a segment the following morning. The New York Times published an opinion piece titled, "The Sterling Crow Problem," when racism meets ignorance in the C-suite. Sterling's name was everywhere. His face was everywhere. The Rolex, the navy suit, the finger pointing at Marin through the boardroom glass. Screenshots from the video became memes. Someone isolated the moment his leg slid off his knee and turned it into a GIF with the caption, "When Karma clocks in for her shift." It spread faster than Sterling could contain it. His PR team, a boutique firm in Buckhead that handled reputations for Atlanta's wealthy, drafted a statement. Sterling approved it in the middle of the night, hands shaking, reading it on his phone in the dark of his living room, while his wife slept upstairs. The statement said he deeply regretted his behavior, that his words did not reflect his values, that he was committed to growth and accountability. It was 43 words of nothing, and the internet ate it alive. The top reply on LinkedIn, where he posted it, had 9,000 likes. "Your values are exactly what we saw in that video. That is who you are. A 43-word apology doesn't undo years of abuse." Then the money started leaving. Ellis & Company's legal team, led by Gideon Moss, completed the compliance audit quickly. The buyback offer was sent to Sterling's attorneys, a formal, notarized letter returning his $2 million investment in full, effective immediately, with a clause permanently severing his relationship with the company. No future investments, no franchise opportunities, no advisory roles, no access to any Ellis & Company property or event. Sterling's attorney called Isolde Croft and tried to negotiate. Isolde listened for less than a minute, then said, "This isn't a negotiation. It's a notification." She hung up. But the buyback was only the beginning. Sterling's hedge fund, Crow Capital Partners, managed money for 38 clients, most of them old money families in the Southeast who valued discretion above all else. The video was the opposite of discretion. Within a week, 6 clients requested full withdrawals. Within 2 weeks, that number was 14. By the end of the month, Crow Capital had lost more than 60% of its assets under management. Reed stopped returning Sterling's calls on the 3rd day. Cole lasted until the 5th, then sent a text that said, "I think we need some distance." The portfolios they had been discussing at the window table, the next big play, were never mentioned again. Sterling's wife, Corinne, moved to her sister's house in Savannah. She did not file for divorce, not yet, but she took the dog and her jewelry, and she left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I watched the video. Don't call me." The country club where Sterling played golf every Saturday suspended his membership pending a conduct review. The review, everyone knew, would last forever. Meanwhile, Maren Ellis did what she always did. She worked. 3 days after the video went viral, she appeared on a podcast called The Grind, a show about Black entrepreneurs and the obstacles they face. She did not name Sterling. She did not need to. Everyone knew. "I stood behind that counter for a reason," she said. "Not because I had to, because I wanted to remember what it feels like. The assumptions, the tone, the way someone can look right through you and decide you're nothing before you've said a single word. That experience doesn't go away when you become a CEO. It follows you into every boardroom, every handshake, every negotiation, and I think it's important to stay close to it. Not because it defines you, but because it reminds you who you're building for." The episode was downloaded more than 1 million times in its first week. Ellis & Company's marketing team did not need to do much. The story did the work. But Maren approved one initiative that Isolde proposed during their next board meeting, a program called Behind the Counter. Every quarter, one member of the executive team would spend a full week working the floor at a different Ellis & Company location, taking orders, making drinks, cleaning tables. No title, no assistant, just an apron and a name tag. Isolde volunteered to go first. The announcement was covered by Forbes, Fast Company, and Business Insider. Forbes ran a headline that would follow Ellis & Company for years. The most inclusive coffee brand in America was built by a woman who never stopped making the coffee. Sterling Crow read that headline on his phone, alone in an empty house that smelled like cold coffee and regret. He did not finish reading. He set the phone face down on the counter and stared at the wall. Somewhere across town, a bell chimed. A door opened. A customer walked in, and a woman in an apron said, "Welcome to Ellis & Company. What can I get you?" Months later, on an ordinary morning, Maren Ellis stood behind the counter at the Peachtree Street flagship and poured a cortado for a woman she had never met. The woman was young, mid-20s, natural hair, a resume folder tucked under her arm. She looked nervous. She looked like she was on her way to an interview and needed something warm to hold. "First time here?" Maren asked. "Yeah." The woman glanced at the prices, then at her wallet. The math was visible on her face. "Try the house blend, on the house." The woman smiled. "Thank you. That's really kind." "It's just coffee." "Good luck today." The woman took the cup and left. She did not know who had made her drink. The store had changed in those months, not the layout. The machines were in the same place. The pastry case still hummed. The bell still chimed. What changed was the feeling. A framed photograph hung behind the counter now. Loretta Ellis beside her coffee cart long ago, apron stained, hands cracked, smiling like she had won something nobody else could see. Beneath it, a brass plaque. "Every empire starts with one cup." Mateo Cruz managed the new Midtown location, the 30th store opened since the video. 21 years old, running a shop the way Marin ran hers. Doors open early, every customer greeted by name. He still had the video on his phone. When new hires asked what kind of company this was, he would show the first 10 seconds and say, "This is what we don't tolerate." Then, he would skip to the board standing up. "And this is who we are." Zara Holt was vice president of operations now. 152 locations under her watch. She kept a photo of the stained apron on her desk. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Isolde Croft presented year-end numbers at the December board meeting. Revenue up 31%. Brand recognition up 44%. The behind-the-counter program had been featured in Harvard Business Review. 3 Fortune 500 companies had reached out to replicate it. Marin listened from the head of the table. Same chair, same folder, same calm. Sterling Crow was not mentioned. His $2 million had been returned. His name removed from every document. His country club membership was never reinstated. His wife came back after several months, but things were quieter now, heavier, shaped by a silence that never fully broke. His fund survived. Barely. 11 clients instead of 38. He had completed a 12-week diversity course, court recommended, after a civil complaint filed by former employees who came forward after seeing the video. He did not go to coffee shops anymore. He made his own at home, alone in a kitchen too big for one person. He never apologized to Marin directly. He drafted emails. He wrote letters he never sent. But he knew, somewhere in the part of himself he had spent a lifetime ignoring, that no apology would be enough. Not for the years, not for Good Girl, not for the $5 bill soaking in foam on a counter that belonged to the woman he had thrown it at. Some debts cannot be paid with words. On that ordinary morning, after the young woman left, Marin wiped down the counter, straightened the cups, checked the grinder. The same things she had done 1,000 times. The same things her grandmother had done. The bell chimed. The door opened. "Welcome to Ellis & Company." Marin smiled. "What can I get you?" If this story hit you, if it made you angry or proud or both, drop a comment. What would you have done if you were Marin? Would you have revealed yourself sooner? Or would you have waited and let the shovel do the work? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Stories like this aren't going anywhere. Neither are we. Dead serious. If you only treat people right when you think they're important, that's not respect. That's performance. Be kind to everyone. You never know who's standing behind that counter. Character shows before status does.